Welcome to another tutorial. My name is Tom. On Cables and Discord, my name is Pandur, and today I want to talk about SocketCluster. So this allows you to create patches that communicate over the internet. So as you can see, I have 3 browser windows open, and when I move my mouse in one, like my position is transferred to the other browsers as well. So this transfers all the data that I send to the other browsers. And this is the patch we will build today. So it looks like this. So it's not that complicated, but there are some interesting things in there. Okay, let me make this bigger and then we will start. So like this. So we will create a new patch. And first of all, so we are talking about SocketCluster. So this is a library, an open source library, which is amazing. You can download it for free. You need a server to run this, so you don't need only the patches on the clients, but also a server. So you have to start up a server. This can happen in many ways. So for one, like Cables gives you the possibility to use its own SocketCluster server. So we will do that because this is the most easiest way. If you deploy your patch to a website, you need your own SocketCluster server, or you use ours if you have a Patreon level that allows this. So then you can use our service, SocketCluster service, on your website. There's also another way now. The standalone version brings a SocketCluster server up. So you can start a SocketCluster server without any of the console-based server startup, all this kind of stuff. If you're not familiar with this, you can also use the standalone to start a SocketCluster server. So this is also like the easiest way if you have no internet. If you have like a local network where you have an installation or something, you can just start up the standalone version and start SocketCluster from there. Okay, so SocketCluster, what does it do? So this is a server that receives data from the clients, and it will transfer all this data to all clients that are in there. So basically, imagine a chat room where like 3 people are and everybody enters their location in the chat. And then this location is transferred to every other client in this network. And this is basically how this works, like a chat room. And yeah, let's go there. Let's do it. So I created a new patch. I will create a SocketCluster op, and this SocketCluster op is in a extension. So let's load this extension. So if you enter SocketCluster, you can load the extension, and then you have all those operators here. So we will use SocketCluster client. This is the main op that we have to use. And let's have a look at the documentation. So there's some documentation here. There is not so many public examples because it's not so clear how it works. This is why we're doing the tutorial now. But this is maintained by Team SocketCluster. So this is basically us, but all the development happens in this team. So you can see here which operators are in there and see who made it and see the examples for each op. Okay, so we have a SocketCluster client. So what I said about the chat room, so this is how this works, right? You have a channel, everybody can use any channel on cables.gl. So this is really just for development. Don't try this with like private data or something. So we will just do a channel. We will just call it tutorial. So anybody who knows this channel name can go in there and read all the data. So be careful with this. Make sure that you know what you're doing, basically. The socket.cables.gl, we will keep it like this. If you have a standalone running, you want to disable SSL and change the port number. That's the stuff you set up in the SocketCluster server operator then on your standalone. So we don't need to change all of this stuff, and everything else is fine basically. So we now see here that this orb is already connected. So if this is like a wrong URL, you will see disconnected, like you will see an error message there. Okay, so now we have our client, we have our channel set up. Let's send some data basically. So this has an output with a socket, and this is basically the connection or the socket connection, and we will use this to communicate to the SocketCluster server. So take the socket and we will create a SocketCluster send object and just create it. So this is now connected to the socket, and this wants a data object to send. So we will just create an empty object like this, and then we can fill in some data in this object. So the SocketCluster send object operator also has a topic. So you can have a channel, and in this channel can be multiple topics. So if you just want to have like different rooms where people can chat, this would be not the channel, but this would be the topic. So you can change the topic and have multiple rooms basically. So, but we will keep it like on main. Okay, so now we have a empty object, and I want to send out the mouse coordinates as we saw in the example, like it was sending the mouse coordinates. So I will create the mouse operator. I will switch it to pixel display. So when I hover here, you see like the real X and Y coordinates in full pixels. This is the easiest way to have like the same scale, even if you have a different size. Like if I have a smaller size, then I will only move in this area, and if a bigger size, maybe it's out of the screen for some clients. But like this is the easiest way to see now. So let's set this using object set number operator. So I used this shortcut, which I really like. So I entered OSN, and then it will show me object set number, which is really helpful. So we want to set this number is called the X coordinate. So I will call it X, and I will connect it to the X here. Then I will create a object set number Y, and then I will connect this to Y, and I will also create an object send number called C. So this is for clicking. So I will connect this to button is down basically. So now when I move my mouse, you will see that the object changes all the time. And but when I visualize the send object, it's not being sent, right? It's only sent when I click send here. So we have to send this data automatically. We want to send this automatically. So I will do this other shortcut. So I will just move the take the X output and just hover it to the yellow port. So this is an incompatible ports, right? But when I release the mouse, like you will see some suggestions. So there's a number trigger on change number. So this operator, you don't have to remember the name. You can just do this shortcut, and then it will trigger when this number changes. And I will connect the Y and the button down to this number. And now when I move my number, you see it's sending the data all the time. So if this is too much, like this can be easily too much to send over the data. So you can limit this. Like you can use the trigger limiter op, for example, and set this. So if I set this to 300, you see it's not sending that often. We will set it to 30. So it's like maximum 30 times per second it will send the object. Okay. So now we are basically sending the data to the SocketCluster, and that's all we need to do. So until we see something, it will take some time, because like this is basically our sending part of the client, and now we will put in the receiving part of the client. But yeah, okay, let's go. So there is a really handy operator, or like there is an operator socket client. No, sorry. Socket client, SocketCluster, I mean, receive object, for example. So let's try this. So this one I will also connect to socket, and let's visualize this data. So now now I will not see anything, right now. It will not show something. But for debugging, it's really handy, or for some projects, it's handy to see your own data. So often you just don't want to receive the data that you send back, but sometimes you want this. So you can click here, receive own data. And when I click this and I move my mouse, you will see the X coordinate is received. So this is already received over the network. And the string output gives me shows me a client ID. So this is my client ID. So this ID doesn't change until I reload the page. So this is the SocketCluster receive object. And we could work with this, but it's hard to manage this data for many clients. So this is like the simple version, but there's a more advanced version which takes, like, we have to do less work for managing all the client data. So there is an operator called SocketCluster. SocketCluster topic info, it's called. And this does a lot of work for us, which is really handy. So first of all, this listens to this topic. It's the same topic that we had before, and it retains one message. So this is basically what we want. And I will set the timeout a bit higher because that's really handy for our case. So, and it will also receive our own data. So now let's have a look what's happening here. So we have this output with the client ID. So this is our client ID. You saw, like, when I was active, like, it from this point on, it knows our client ID. And there is a object with messages. So this object, this object contains data. To see this data better, deactivate the experimental stringify. So, so now I can see I have this object and I have a timestamp. So when did this happen? I have the client ID. This is the same ID that is in this table. This will be important later. So now when I hover, you see this data is changing. And now when I will open a second browser, and I will, let's do it this way. I will open this patch again here and make it a bit smaller. So now when I move my mouse here, you see there's a second client now. There's a second client ID, and there's a second payload with coordinates. So when I move my mouse here, it's a different numbers than when I move it here. So this is basically, so this takes all this storing of data from different clients for us. So I can just open this in a new tab, and then I have a third client number, and this one has a third payload with information about this operator. So great. So this is basically all the data we need, right? So now we just have to do something with the data. So let's do this. So I will just remove this. We'll keep this up. I will create a main loop. I will create a pixel projection up. So this is that we work in pixel space. So each transform that we do, we will do in pixels. So then I want to draw a circle. And so we don't see the circle at all, right? So this is strange, but this is because the circle is less than 1 pixel big. So when I change this to 20, we will start to see the circle. And when I move this, you see I have to move it like really high values because this is now in pixels. So because we are sending mouse coordinates in pixels, this is the most handy way to do for us now. Okay, so yeah, let's go there. So we want to draw a circle basically for every client that we have, right? So this array gives us all our clients. So right now this array has a length of 3. So we will just use this array, and this array contains strings like those IDs. And so we will use the array iterator strings. So I just typed in AIS and I get array iterator strings. So that's really handy. Oops. And I press enter and not delete, and then I will have it. And so I will connect this to active clients. Now, those circles are drawn 3 times. So we can visualize this by connecting the index to pos x and add a number to it and multiply it by 20. So we see we have three circles now. So that's really handy. So to make it easier to differentiate the circles, we can also use this client ID as a random number. So for this, we can say string random number from string. And then every time we get a random number from this string. So I can use this random number to generate more random numbers and use them for colorizing the circle. So I can connect this here and here, and now every circle has a different color. So I can change the seed. This is basically the seed. I can change the seed like this, and then I can have different colors. So let's pick some that are more easy to differentiate. So like this, for example. Okay, so each circle has a different number. So one client actually just timed out. This is an interesting topic also. Like you can set a duration here when the clients will time out. So, okay. So now we see, like when I go here, when I create a new client, then we see there's a new color coming in, and here's a new color coming in. So I can just do this many times, and it works fine. And at one point, they will fade out after 20 seconds. They will die, basically, and not be displayed anymore. So this is all this topic info operator handles this stuff for us. So that's awesome. So, okay, let's now position the circles. How do we do that? So we have this messages object, and this object, let's have a look at it again. So this object is built like this. The client ID contains an object with time, timestamp, and payload, and we want to come to the payload. So let's do this step by step. So first of all, this object, we want the last message from this client ID. So we would use so it's a bit complicated, but trust me, it's worth it. So for a chat, basically, you want to retain like the last 10 messages of a client, for example, and not only the last one. But for our example, we only want the last position of the cursor. So this is why there's only one payload in each, but it's still an array. So if we change this number here to 10, then we have the last 10 messages from each client. Okay, so let's get the client data by using messages, and then use object get array, because it's an array of messages. So and the key for this array is the client ID. So we can use this client ID. So in each iteration, I will use this client ID, and it will output the payload, so the message data. So let's clean up a little bit. And now let's have a look at this. So now we see we have this one object with the timestamp and the payload and the number in there. So the easiest way to get through complicated objects like this is you click the op and go to the result, and then you have this little cogwheel here. So when I click this, I will see this overview, and those are buttons that I can get, and I can just go to the X line and the value. You see, this is what I want, and I can click number, and then it will output that number to me. So now I get the x coordinate of this one circle. So let's connect this. So we will remove this again. We will connect the x axis, the x transform to this output. And then when I move my mouse, you see I'm moving my circle already. So we will do the same thing for y. So I will just copy paste this and change this last bit of this path to y. And then we get our y number and connect this to transform y. And now I can move my circle freely around. So I open this window, I can move this circle around, I move this window, can move this one, and so on. So we don't need to reload them actually. Like usually you would need to reload them because we made the changes only there. But the visualization here works already fine because those patches are already sending. So when I reload this, then I need to save this first. So when I reload this, you see it's working here. And this client doesn't have all the information about all the other circles. But slowly when I change this tab, for example, then you see we have the yellow circle in here. And because the colors are random, right? But you see in each window they are the same. And this is because the random number from string gives, this is like a seed. Like this string always will give me this random value. And then this random numbers will give me those 3 random values. And then they all stay the same all the time. So this is why you can tell, yeah, I'm the yellow cursor, but you will always be the yellow cursor, even though we're not transferring this color over the network, but still, because it's a random seed and it's a reproducible random number, it will always have the same color in each window. And yeah, this is really handy for this case. Great. Okay, one last thing I want to do is to also visualize the clicked state. So we created a parameter called C. So this is when I click my mouse, and we can connect this to the transform scale like this. So now only when I click I see my circle, but I can map range this and say, okay, when I'm not clicking, the size is 0.5, and when I click, it's a bit bigger. So this also works here now. So let me save this patch. And now I can see my cursor and I can click and it will transfer the size. And yeah, so one more thing. So we can now also set the trigger limiter to 300 again. And then we will see the traffic is really low, but the delay is really huge. So the circle will be only transferred a few times. So 30, I guess it's a really good number. You could also, if you have a more advanced setup, interpolate between those coordinates, because it gets a bit laggy if you go less. But one thing that helps with the lagginess, also not show your own circle, just draw the circle from the mouse coordinates and not receive your own circle over the internet. And yeah, you could do some stuff to smooth those values on the client so that they are 60 FPS and maybe you send them way lower. There's a lot of possibilities that you can do with this. And yeah, so that is SocketCluster, really, really helpful and easy to master library. So try it out. Let us know what you want to do with it. Yeah, see you. Bye-bye.